Hello, you are listening to Just Films and That. This is the podcast where we talk about films we think might be underrated, underseen, or sometimes we just want to talk about them. I'm the host for this week, Josh Hallam, and I'm joined, as ever, by my brilliant co-host, Alice Oliver. It was Alice's turn to pick the film this week, and it is a biggie. It is Waterworld from 1995. So, let's get cracking, shall we? This is the opportunity to say, let's dive in there, didn't I? Same as Free Willy.
You're losing your touch, Josh.
Open goals keep presenting themselves to me, Alice, and I just keep missing. So, Waterworld from 1995. If you haven't seen it, then spoiler warning for it. Now, I think we know this is going to be a big one. This is much like American Psycho. I think this is going to be a big one. So, Alice, you've picked this one.
Mm-hmm.
Dying to know why.
Okay.
But first, tell the guys at home what Waterworld's about and why did you pick it?
So I actually kind of found it a bit difficult to write this summary, but I'll give it a go. To try and really condense it because it's just
sometimes it's hard to write down because I wanted to. All right.
Yeah.
Which is because it's good, isn't it? Like that's what you want to say.
More the synopsis, really, more the summary of the film itself, because it was it's like how long do you make this thing? Anyway, so I've tried. Here's what I've got. Right, so it's a post-apocalyptic action film based in a world where climate change has maxed out and melted the ice caps, starring Kevin Costner as the protagonist, who is a human with gills and webbed feet, and Dennis Hopper as the main villain. So people are living in floating villages known as atolls, and things are pretty terrible. There's not enough food or fresh water, and everyone looks dirty, exhausted, and malnourished. A gang of pirates known as smokers, led by Dennis Hopper, believe that a tattoo on the back of a young girl called Enola is a map to dry land, so they come after her, but Kevin Costner helps her and her guardian Helen escape, and then they're sort of on the run for a bit until they finally kidnap the girl. Kevin rescues her, and they eventually find their way to dry land, which is where the young girl originally came from. So that's kind of it. That was the best I could do.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell.
A big nutshell, but...
Why did I pick it? So, I remember watching this film when I was a kid, and I really liked it.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I was quite a bit older that I realised that other people thought it was really bad. I didn't realise that people thought it was bad until much later, and I was like, oh, that's a shame. And I was like, but I bet they're wrong. I bet everyone's wrong and I'm right, and this film is actually great. And then obviously we had Pav on recently, and he was talking about his love of Kevin Costner, and he mentioned Waterworld, and I was mentioning that it was on my list, so it was on my mind anyway, and I was like, now is the time. I think that this film might be underrated, but also I've just really got to go back and watch it again because I haven't seen it since I was a kid.
I have to know one of those films. I have to know.
I have to know. Is it as bad as people think it is, sort of thing? So that's the main reason why I chose it. So I thought it might be underrated, and I just kind of wanted to watch it again also.
Yeah. So mainly underrated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Had you seen this one?
No, so I'd never seen this before. All I knew about this film is that it was quite a famous flop, both critically and commercially. I think it was one of the most expensive films ever made when it came out. I don't think it made its budget back. I think it made money, but I think it made money. It didn't make enough to make its budget back. So whereas it made a few $100 million, that wasn't enough to break even. So I don't know if you could call it underseen. And all I know about it is that it is considered one of cinema history's big flops, and that's all. Belly flop, should we say, because of water. I hadn't seen it before. I'd seen bits of it, just referenced in stuff and scenes here and there, and I knew the premise, but no, I'd never seen it before. So I went into this sort of really interested to see what the crack was. And see.
And what did you think? Long pause.
It is. Look, there's things I liked and things I didn't. So I didn't hate it. I wouldn't be in a rush to watch it again. It's one of those films, but that doesn't mean it's not underrated. But let's get stuck in then to talking about it then. So obviously you picked it. So that's my précis. That's my overall, which is there was stuff I liked, stuff I didn't, and it's quite a balanced in my head. This one, it's quite I like that, didn't like that. Could see why this was an issue. Could see why that wasn't. Whatever. Because for me, and I'll ask you now what you think about it, but for me, I'm looking at this there's definitely there's a hit in there. If you dig around, there's the elements, and it's definitely one of those.
Really try, really concentrate.
Nearly 30 years on now, And lots of people, even when I was watching it, have written articles like, why didn't it work?
Mm-hmm.
Like, all the pieces were there. So why didn't it work? So what did you think watching it again then? Did it live up to the expectation, or were you like, ugh?
So I went into this really wanting to love it. I was like, I know I'm gonna find things in here to love. I think other people are just being too mean, or they had expectations and they weren't met, and then that's why they think it's bad. But I'm ready to love this, and I went in thinking that firmly with my rose tinted goggles on and all that, and it didn't live up to that, and it just wasn't.
No.
There are problems with it, like. I write my notes by hand, right? Scribble down in a little scrapbook when I'm watching, and I was about 8 or 9 points in until I got to something good.
Yeah,
like it was all, this is not good.
So
this
do you
needed
write
work.
the thoughts
this
down
is bad.
Do you write the thoughts down as they come to you when you do your notes?
Yeah, I try to, but it's usually like chronological in the film. Like, you know, as the things happen, I think, oh yeah, that's good, or like if there's like a repeated thing, like if there's a repeated piece of music or repeated shots or repeated dialogue or so, it's like, oh, they've used that again, that's interesting, that sort of thing. But yeah, for this, my notes were overwhelmingly negative.
Right.
But there was stuff that I could find in there that I liked, and I don't want this to just be, I don't want to just bash this all the way through.
Yeah,
right?
Well, that's not what we're about, is it?
Well, and other people have already done that. Everyone's already said that they don't think the film's very good.
30 years ago.
So fine. So obviously we're going to give you some, like, you know, proper, honest analysis. But, you know, I'm going to try and find the good stuff in there as well. So
Let's hear it then.
I love the concept, Josh. I think it's a brilliant concept, right? And the challenges that this world brings to the people who live there. You know, everyone has to live on water, and it fucking sucks. So you've got a real broad opportunity for creativity here to see how people have adapted and learned to overcome certain aspects of life, because people have been living this way for a few hundred years now, it seems, but they've somehow made it work. I think it's really ambitious. Like, the whole thing looks and feels so ambitious. All that filming on water must have brought so many challenges. And I know that the production encountered a lot of issues because of that sort of environment. So it must have been such hard work for everyone involved. So I've got a lot of time for that. And I did read that Kevin Costner like hurt himself a few times, and he sort of got into a couple of scrapes because of it. And if you look at him as well, he's barefoot for like the whole thing, running around that set with no bloody shoes on. I guess most people are, aren't they? They're not wearing shoes.
And it's definitely like, it's sort of well documented how challenging this was to make, because I believe it was Steven Spielberg who, I don't think he's involved, but apparently he said to the team, do not film this on open water.
Yeah, because of Jaws, because he had the experience.
Yeah, he said, I did Jaws, go and get a tank, which is what things like Titanic did. They build a massive tank, and then they make it on a big tank, whereas this, they went, no, it was like real water in it.
Yeah,
but then if you know, and I can completely get that perhaps it's the cinematic equivalent of your eyes being bigger than your belly, thinking, well, that might have happened, but that was 20 years ago at this point. So no, we'll be able to do it. But obviously real water brings real challenges like tides and currents and wildlife and all that, whereas a tank's a tank.
Yeah, exactly. You've got so much more control over that. And I did read that they did do some of it in a tank, but yeah, some of it, like you say, they did it in the sea, which just seems crazy. But, you know, love you for trying. Love you for giving it a go. Not easy, especially when you've got Steven Spielberg telling you not to do it.
Yeah. Why would you listen to him at this point
what does
in
he
time?
know?
He's only just made Jurassic Park. Anyway.
Let him on set. Some of it, I think, did look spectacular. So I particularly enjoyed some of the shots where you get like the silhouettes of a boat or other water vehicles that are traveling kind of along the skyline. And you've got like these massive depictions of the moon and the sun on the horizon behind it. That all looked really dramatic, really cinematic and lovely. So the smokers, who are the pirate guys, they travel a lot on jet skis. And there's a few great scenes where they're traveling across the ocean sort of from the horizon line. And it just looks so dramatic. And you get some real, you know, great action film shots when they're doing that sort of thing. There was also a couple of shots with Kevin Costner where he was stood at the top of his mast on his his thing, which is a trimaran. I had to look this up. A trimaran is his boat. Is that what you call it? So
I'm guessing it's some sort of 3-pointed thing based on the name, but yeah. Or is it a real thing, or is it made up?
Trimaran. Yeah, no, I think it's real. I think it's real.
Right,
it's
okay.
his vessel. So yeah, you get these like wild, mad, sweeping wide shots of him on the top of the mast, just kind of looking out to sea and stuff. And this was all really great to look at, really cinematic, and had a real impact. There's quite a nice moment as well. It's sort of a moment of calm in amongst the chaos of this film, because it is quite chaotic. It's quite sort of fast and loud. There's a lot of kind of big drawn out action scenes and that. But there is a moment where Kevin Costner's character is teaching Enola, who's the young girl, is teaching her to swim. So somehow she doesn't know how to swim, despite the fact that we live in a water world and she's been living in water
not knowing
all her life,
how
right?
to walk.
Yeah, like, okay, so we'll forget about that for now. But there's this moment where he's trying to teach her to swim. So his character is very much like a bit of this kind of reluctant hero sort of thing, because he doesn't really want to be helping Enola and Helen. He's just kind of doing it. He ended up doing it because it served him at the time, because they rescued him from a situation. But then his whole attitude is kind of like he's been lumbered with them because there's not really anywhere else to go. So, they're all kind of stuck on this boat together, and he's quite mean to them everywhere. At times. Water in it, everywhere all over the place.
Takes the piss.
So then there's this segment where he starts teaching her to swim, and it's just like this really nice calming moment in amongst the action and the chaos, and there's some beautiful shots of them in the water, and everything just really slows down for a bit, and you get some nice character development from him, but it's also just really pleasant to look at. And I think the whole thing has been shot really nicely. It's just really quite simple, I think, and it just really stands out from the rest of the film, and for me that was a real highlight.
And I think that's what I mean when I say there's something in there. But there's just some weird decisions, particularly, which we'll come on to, but there's some weird decisions and inconsistencies. It's like, but there was definitely something there, so why have you done that? When you could have done that. So no, I agree. I'm completely on board with that, yeah.
Yeah, those were the main things for me. So what about you? What were the positives that you were able to take away from this?
A lot of what you've said there, particularly around how it looks and the production design. So yeah, first off, it's a good premise. And it feels relevant as well, even more relevant today than it did in 1995. Sure. Some good world building, or some good attempts at world building in there. So the way they barter with stuff, the way they barter with, dirt and stuff like that. The way there's a darker side of the way the world is. Like, for example, they try and sort of almost breed Kevin Costner with someone at one point, because obviously because of the connotations and the needs of survival and stuff like that, that's where humanity has got to, that it's not really about romance anymore, it's survival. So I enjoyed something like that. There's a made-up language in it. Well, I think it's a made-up language in it called Portuguese, yeah, which I quite like. There's definitely some ideas in there. Now, it is very derivative of another franchise, which we'll come on to, but there was definitely some attempts in there to make it good. I enjoyed that. Enjoyed a lot of the production design. Speaking of the language, love the fact that it's 500 years in the future. The whole planet is water, yet still accents. There's still a guy with a Northern Irish accent. Yeah, Dennis Hopper's American, like Texan.
There's English. Yeah.
Love
Spanish,
that.
I think, as well.
There may well still be accents. You get people who aren't from that place, but So my niece lives near my parents in Lancashire, but her dad is from Leeds and has a very strong Leeds accent. So every now and then she sounds really Leeds, despite the fact that she's, not from there or whatever. So I liked that. So I suppose that, that counteracts that idea that, perhaps accents would stand the test of time. But I still liked it was funny that one guy has it's like a really strong Belfast accent.
Yeah.
At one point or something. So I enjoyed that. I thought it was funny. Because there must have been the discussion of like, they wouldn't sound like that. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, just let them do their own accents.
So I loved how it looked, the production design, like you said, the way the boats look and some of the shots of the open water, the smoker's sort of big boat and lair. I quite like that. Again, there's a little bit of sort of on the nose political stuff with that in terms of the fact that it's the Exxon. Is it the Exxon Valdez they're on or something like that? It's one of the big ships from the oil spill in the 90s or 80s. Some good practical effects, some good stunts. I like things like some thoughts gone into the way the mariner moves around his boat. You know, he moves around the boat like a man who would know how to move around the boat. He's sliding off stuff. He's jumping off stuff. You know, it's almost like a dance to him. He knows what he's doing, like stuff like that. I already said there's some great stunts. And just finally as well, some good supporting performances. You know, we've said this before. I'll say it again. I love a scenery chewing bad guy. And Dennis Hopper. I mean, Dennis Hopper made This and Speed in the same year.
Yeah.
He must have been in a pretty weird headspace.
Yeah,
because he is going for it in this, and it doesn't. I wouldn't say it particularly elevates the film, but by golly, it's fun to watch when he's on screen. Also, a little shout out as well, Michael Jeter, who plays the scientist with the hot air balloon. Can't remember his name, but he is one of the great supporting actors of the 90s and early noughties cinema. Sadly, no longer with us. I think he passed away quite young from, I think, AIDS or AIDS-related illness. But he's great in this. He was in Mouse Hunt. He's in The Green Mile. He's in a few other things, but he's brilliant in this. And he's one of those actors who has a real likability. And I very much like to. I actually wish I had more of that character, because I think there's more you could have done with the sort of inventor trying to figure out how to save everyone, because there seems to be only him. There's no one else seems to be. Everyone else seems to go, well, we're knackered, aren't we? Let's just sort of live on all this water. Whereas he's he's trying to figure out how to get them off the water.
Yeah, he's like the sort of one reminder of like society or culture or whatever, where everyone else is just, it's rough, innit? It's Mad Max, innit? It's Mad Max on the water. Everyone's just kind of, it's just about survival.
And there's the franchise.
Huh?
And there's the franchise. I said I'll talk about it later. It's just unavoidable. It's Mad Max on water.
Well, I think they wanted, that was intentional, I believe.
Yeah.
Like they said when they were making it, it's like, oh, we kind of want it to be like Mad Max. And it's like, oh, well, it kind of is. I definitely felt that.
And so we'll come on to dislikes now then. Well, we'll come on to dislikes in a minute, but there are plenty of films that are, it's this but this. Famously, the pitch for Alien was Jaws in space.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that's fine, because if you watch Alien and Jaws side by side, yeah, really, really similar, or similar sort of executions and ideas, but it's not so obvious that whereas in this, I think one of the main criticisms at the time was it was so derivative. It was such a rip-off, because even some of the production design and stuff, and the way it looks, is very similar. Okay then, so we've already touched on it a little bit there, but let's move on to the dislikes, because I think it's going to be a rare occasion where there might be more dislikes than likes, unfortunately, for Waterworld. But we like to be balanced. We've said what we've liked. Now let's say the other side of that coin. So, Alice, you've already said you've got quite a few points there. So I'd be interested to hear them, especially because it's not often... It's happened a handful of times where one of us has picked a film and gone, I've rewatched it and it's not...
hasn't lived up to, my memory.
So, let's hear it then. So what didn't you like about the film?
So quite a lot, unfortunately, but I'm going to try and condense this and you know, limit my time talking about the things I didn't like about it. So in terms of genre and target audience, I feel like it is a little bit muddled. So at times it feels a bit like a family action adventure, especially because of how prominent Enola's character is. But then sometimes something incredibly gruesome or dark would happen, like when the smokers are using dead bodies as puppets to lure our heroes into a trap. Loved that moment, by the way. Thought that was excellent. Really creepy, really sadistic. But it didn't match up with a lot of what I'd seen up to that point. Some elements of it feel a bit like they're more of a fantasy film. So like Enola's very existence seems to be a little bit magical at first, because she's like having these visions, although they do ultimately turn out to be memories of animals and trees and stuff. And then you've got Kevin Costner's mutation or evolution into a person with gills and webbed feet. And then the aesthetic of it is pretty grim and bleak. Like everyone's just wearing these like dark brown rags
in it.
There's no vibrancy to the world at all. There's no diverse color palette, and there's like this big shark monster thing as well. So it feels like the overall vision lacked direction and certainty, and it feels like it kind of hops between fantasy, sci-fi, action, dystopia, and a family film without really committing to any of them.
That's one of my main points as well. It just says, who is this for? Because I think it's a 12.
Right.
I think it's a 12.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's elements in there where if you tweaked it, there's no reason this couldn't be a family fantasy PG film. And instead they go the other way and they go too dark. So like you said, you've got the monster, they've got the puppets bit. Some of the stuff the smokers do is really quite dark. But then you've also got things like that Helen seems to be bartering with sex. Like her thing is like, you could essentially rape me.
Yeah.
And then there's other bits where he's trading with another drifter where he is giving them the women as he gives them an hour with her or something like that, and it's
Something
like,
like
do
that,
whatever
yeah.
you want. So that's dark, man. Do you know what I mean? And again, if that is triggering for anyone at home, then I apologize, but it is dark. And she does, and again, she barters with the body, but not only that, because you could do that in a PG sense and not be as blunt about it.
Yeah, or
and, I'll do anything you want.
Or go fully into the darkness of it, and then we've got a like an 18 on our hands, and we're really dealing with how dark the whole thing is.
Desperation and survival,
that could have been great, but nothing else matched that.
No,
like it felt like it was like the music didn't match that sort of thing. The action sequences didn't match that.
Right? It feels like what they want is fantasy adventure, a big fantasy, and instead they put those moments in because not only does she barter with him using her body, she then literally strips off in front of him. And it's like someone at the studio's gone, well, we need some nudity.
Yeah, and it's a PG-13. I just looked it up quickly then, so that's interesting.
That's a 12 equivalent, isn't it? Yeah. So, and obviously it's not, it's not full frontal or anything like that, but it's still clear what she's doing. You still see, you still see her backside and stuff like that. So, and that felt odd to me. Like until that point, I was like, oh, it's a bit of an adventure sort of thing, and then it took that turn. I was like, oh, what's this all about? So that was one of my notes as well. So who is it for? So that's your first point. What else?
So you've touched on some of the world building there, and some of it really was there, but in other parts it was really lacking, and I feel like there was a real missed opportunity in some places to show how these people have survived for so long and give us some explanations into how they have and how certain things have happened and why they act a certain way or speak a certain way or whatever. So things like, the smokers seem to have an unlimited supply of cigarettes and alcohol, right? But from what we understand of the story, we've been living this way on this Waterworld, which they do say in the film, which is also a bit cringe. They've been living this way for a few hundred years, right? So where are they getting this stuff from? Because it's all Jack Daniels bottles and it's all cigarettes that look exactly like cigarettes do now, right? So I feel like I kind of wanted something to show them maybe growing their own tobacco plants or like making synthetic tobacco or something, because they're doing all sorts on that big vessel that they have, like all the kind of his subjects, I guess, Dennis Hopper's subjects are, they're doing things, they're kind of building things, they're working with fire and metal and stuff. So I kind of just wanted to see some of that. It's like, where have all these cigarettes come from?
How are people surviving?
Yeah, like I don't believe that you've still got cigarettes left over, given that you're all chain smokers and you've been living this way. Like we've, as a society, have been living this way for 500 years or so. That's just the most prominent example, but there was a lot of that throughout the film where it was kind of like, I don't know why you're doing this, or I need to see how you've got there to make the whole story and to make the characters and to make this world a little bit more developed, a little bit more believable, and to really offer some substance to it, because I feel like the substance was really missing a lot of the times, and it left it all feeling a bit hollow, which was a real shame, I thought.
It's a bit, again, it's a bit all premise, no execution, isn't it?
Yeah, sadly.
So it's a world where it's all on water, right? Okay, now does everything else happen? Nah, it's fine. And it's like you say, okay, so they've got cigarettes and alcohol, right? So perhaps they found that ship. Perhaps that ship was just adrift. They found it, and there's a stash of all that stuff on there. But I feel like if you're going to have a world that is so stylized and so weird that if you then show them drinking modern, for us, alcohol and cigarettes, then you're going to go, hang on, how's he got that?
Yeah, it feels a bit, it just jars you a little bit, it throws you out of it a bit. Like, because have them smoking, I don't know, like some sort of leaf that's got some stuff in it, or maybe they've made like a pipe or something. Like, have their own stuff. Like, I wanted them to have their own stuff. It's like, oh, this is what cigarettes look like now, or this is what alcohol looks like now, or tastes like now, that sort of thing.
And I think it's one of those as well where the premise is so severe. Everything's water. So it's like time travel. It's just open to plot holes. It's just open to, but what about that? But what about that? But what about that? One of the things I noted was they seem to be trading jars of dirt. what fucking use is that?
Well, my assumption was to grow things. So to grow like seeds or bulbs or something. But they never talk about it.
No.
They never talk about it.
I thought I was being quite basic, and it was like, what? Like you could make your own little country if you got enough fucking dirt or whatever.
Island, yeah.
But and also, I suppose there's another thing as well. Is, they find what is it's the tip of Mount Everest at the end, isn't it? That's where everyone's living. Well, that's where the people where they settle. How would someone not have found that? It's not little, is it? It's like
the globe is pretty big, Josh. It's it's
a
long way to travel.
Yeah, I suppose back to my point. It's such a severe premise that it's similar to time travel. It's just open to be like, what? Like, what about X, Y, and Z? So, anything else from you then?
So some of the script I didn't think was terrific. Some of it didn't feel very natural or convincing and was a little bit cheesy at times. And I think I would have liked it to have been a bit more naturalistic, and I think that would have worked better. So like we said already, Dennis Hopper is doing so much. Like he's acting so hard, really trying to do his best, but his character is so two-dimensional that there really is only so much he can do with it. And then just finally, just a few little things that I noted. So I thought some of the action sequences were too long and repetitive. I noticed that most characters had really great teeth, and this was never explained. The atolls look flimsy as hell, so I just found myself asking, well, what happens during a major storm? The music was a bit too much for me at times. Where are they getting all the petrol for the jet skis? And when they meet that drifter, so our fella from Belfast, like you say, so obviously because he's not very nice, they end up killing him and they just toss his body overboard. And I was like, you'd either eat him or use him for fishing purposes. So it's like, that just felt like another inconsistency. It's like, you've shown us up until this point how desperate you are, that you're starving. Here you've got a fresh dead body and you're not going to do anything with it. It just seemed, I don't know.
Like you say, even use it for stuff.
Fish, you could fish with it, right? You need fish or whatever. But yeah, those were there's a bit more, but I don't want to be doing this. What about you? Was there anything else on your list?
Yeah, a lot of what you've said. That I mean, it is so for a film that is nearly 2.5 hours, that has so many unanswered questions. It feels so bloated. The whole bit with the drifter and the trading of the women added nothing. It added nothing to the story, so why was it there? That stank to me of some sort of like, well, we need this, we need to show this, we need to show, maybe like multiple writers or studio interference or something, where for some reason that scene got in there and it added absolutely nothing. So that was my main issue. So I talked about, it's bloated. Again, okay, we joke that I don't like films that are more than 2 hours. If there's a story told well, I don't care how long it is, but this
you don't notice, do you? Yeah.
This film was so overlong and so bloated. Again, the audience thing we touched on. Yeah, just to touch on that, the script inconsistencies were the main issue for me. So there's some all right ideas of world building, but then that leads to questions which go unanswered, which just distracts from the actual overall story, of which is a very basic plot, which they somehow stretch out too much. So for me, the main issue with the script then came into the character development and some of the uneven exposition. So the Mariner's a dick. He's not a heroic character, so he throws Enola overboard. He's a bit of a brute. He slashes Helen's hair off in a scene that maybe go, oh God, like
it's quite aggressive, isn't it?
Yeah, I've seen films with leading characters that are supposed to be heroic. Some of the way, for example, we touched on before, I like the James Bond films. Some of the way James Bond acts, particularly back in the day, is very misogynistic, sexist, brutish, aggressive, violent, all that sort of stuff. But I think he's too much of a brute to be affectionate, and then he just changes on a dime. So one day he's just swimming with Enola, and I was like, well, what? It's like she wakes up and he's just suddenly decided to like this little girl, and I was like, well, what made that? And then she loves him. So then she's saying stuff to the bad guys like, he'll come for me and stuff like that. And I was like, I don't see any reason why you'd think that he would.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe he will.
like, why would he put himself at risk when he's a drifter who's just going from place to place? So there's exposition in the wrong places. So I really like the concept. But like, for example, we don't find out how Deacon knows about Enola. He just does know from what I can see. We don't even know what smokers are. Obviously, it's clear from fairly early on that they're basically pirates. but we don't know what they are. So when they come in and people are like, smokers, I'm like, what? And what are they? So there's some good ideas in there, but I think they've gone with the sort of style over substance route, and I think it's a shame because I think there's a good idea in there, but I do think, like you say, unfortunately, there's a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of holes, a lot of weird decisions with character development, particularly around the Mariner, and also. It's the same director as Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and Kevin Costner, and they didn't use a Bryan Adams song, so I think that's an issue as well. Okay, so we're going to move on to talk about the critical reception now, but this is so difficult. So when you picked this, you hadn't seen it again.
Mm-hmm.
So you picked it because it's underrated. So when you picked it, had you looked at the scores?
Yes. And I thought, that sounds pretty underrated, considering how much I feel like I enjoyed it.
I think, what would I give it? It's probably a 4 out of 10.
Yeah.
Something like that. Mm-hmm. But thinking about what you thought when you picked it, probably a 5 or something like that, quite middling, maybe less. I would probably say it's a 4 or something like that. It wasn't great. There was a few redeeming features, but it wasn't enough to save it from the massive inconsistencies in terms of the script, who it's for, execution in general, that sort of stuff. So I probably am going to go out on a limb before you've even said the critical section and say we won't say this is underrated, but let's hear it. Let's hear it.
So, at the time of recording, over on IMDb, it gets 6.3 out of 10. And then over on Rotten Tomatoes, the critics give it 45%, and then the audience give it 43%. And the critics' consensus, and I've jotted this down because I just agreed with it fully, is though it suffered from toxic buzz at the time of its release, Waterworld is ultimately an ambitious misfire, an extravagant sci-fi flick with some decent moments and a lot of silly ones.
I think I'd be inclined to agree with that.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty fair.
That's about an average of 5 out of 10, isn't it, roughly?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I don't actually think it's underrated.
That's
and
so
I
rare.
think I was wrong. I think I was wrong in this instance.
But I don't think you were wrong to pick it because that nostalgia obviously carried something for you, and you clearly enjoyed it at some point.
Oh, for sure. And I'm so glad I watched it again. So glad. Like, I had to know. I always want to know, why do people hate this thing? Why are people saying bad things about it? I made myself read 50 Shades of Grey because I had to know why people... So, you had some people saying it was amazing, other people saying it was terrible. So I had to form my own opinion. So I read it and it was absolute trash. And then, so with this, I was like, I just needed to know.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I watched it. But no, I don't think that's underrated. It's probably about appropriately rated. That 6.3 on IMDb is pretty generous. When you think that something like Natural Born Killers got like 47 from the critics,
and that's the mad thing, isn't
it?
Some of the ones we've done when you're getting into your low percentages, like Van Helsing. Van Helsing's better than this. You know what I mean? So I would say, it is appropriately rated, but not underrated.
No, same. Sad. Sorry, Pav.
Okay, there we go. Another one in the bag. And the rare, not underrated category. There's not many in that vault. No. I think it's in there with All Dogs Go to Heaven. And there's definitely 1 or 2 I've picked. But I just can't think of them off the top of my head because we've done a lot of episodes, haven't we?
Haven't we?
We will be back next week with another film. Hopefully this time we might be a little bit more successful in picking something that's underrated or underseen. Or who knows, it might be a classic or it might be a listener suggestion. We like to keep you on your toes. We like to keep you guessing. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us at filmsandthatpod@gmail.com, we're on all the social medias. If you search for Just Films and That on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, give us a follow, get in touch, suggest films. We're always happy to hear from you and we're always happy to, engage with you guys out there and all that sort of stuff. We're on Patreon as well, so if you would like bonus content, extended episodes a day early, then head on over to Patreon and search for us there. And there's plenty of tiers if you want to support us. Any support is massively appreciated. The link to it is also in the episode description. We're on the television as well, aren't we, Alice?
We are indeed. Every Friday evening from 6 p.m, you can find me and Josh talking about all our favourite underrated and underseen films on the local TV network. So if you live in Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Liverpool, or the northeast of England, you can find us on Channel 7 on Freeview. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. I'm also uploading all the videos to Dailymotion. So if you head on over there and type in Just Films and that, you'll find us. But on the telly, that's every Friday from 6 p.m.
Yes, lots of ways to see us, hear us, contact us, engage with us, all that sort of stuff. But as ever, your support means a lot. Thank you very much for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode. It's goodbye from me. Cheerio!
Bye!